afternoon, everybody. I appreciate you being here today on such a gorgeous day. We are so grateful to Michael Yakubov, who is CEO of Resumaniacs. I'm sure he'll tell you about himself. It's a career training and development center. I thank you all again for being here. I hope that you will sign up for our newsletter so you hear about all of our programs at Union Public Library. And my name is Debbie Walter. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Michael to the program. Michael?
Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time. As Debbie mentioned, it is a really nice day out, so I appreciate you being here with me. And I hope I could share something to you that will be helpful, at least a tool that you can kind of put into your pocket and use in the future in your career kind of goals and progression. So I'm going to share my screen. I will apologize. As we've all learned, you know, between the dog in the room and my kids about to come home from school, there might be some background noise, but I'll try to keep it down to a minimum. I've talked to my wife, please keep it down. So I appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen. Just let me know if you can see my screen at the moment. Yeah. Okay. So, you know, my company is called the Resumaniacs, really a name that I let the public pick. We put out a variety of different names years back on Twitter, and this came back to be the most popular name, so we went with it. And since 2017, I've had this company, and when we launched, we really wanted to just provide resume service to help people kind of understand how to write resumes, understand what are the pieces that need to be part of it, and it's kind of evolved as I started to get clients. Never would I have thought that I would have more than 100 different clients and more. Especially now, post-COVID, as people are trying to rebound or rethink their careers. So I've had a tremendous amount of return on my investment in time. And really, for me, the passion is to be able to help people kind of reach the peak of their potential and to be able to show that and showcase that. So in addition to doing resume writing, my company, we do interview training skills, LinkedIn profile design. We speak at corporate engagements about upward mobility and how to diversify a workforce, how to create the right hiring mechanisms, how to look at attrition if people are retiring and have cross-training. In some cases, we consult when companies want to have layoffs, what that should look like, and potentially how can we help them use data and analytics to make some insightful decisions rather than kind of just making decisions based on what they think they should. And since we started the company, we've had a tremendous return on people attaining interviews, getting to the second interview level, getting offered and hired in the field of their interest, and then of course being able to negotiate their salary. I keep track of all of my data since the beginning of time. I'm really keen on making sure that we identify all those push and pull factors that help people be successful. So I'm excited to be here today, and I appreciate Debbie once again. Hopefully we don't have any technical difficulties, but one of my favorite quotes is, "Good timber does not grow with ease. The stronger the wind, the stronger the trees." Believe it or not, this was a farming poem, but I really like it because it really kind of is true. You know, the stronger the roots that we plant, and particularly our resume and our career personal progression, I think we can withstand a lot of things, right? And COVID tested that more than anything. So I really like this quote. I kind of go by it in many ways, and it kind of steers the path of today's conversation. So I have a lot of content. And so as I kind of share this with you, I hope that I can highlight on the things that are really going to be a good perspective for you. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what is that mental aspect of kind of preparing to write a resume from scratch. I'll talk to you about the pieces that need to be part of your resume, what ingredients you need, right? I try to be a little whimsical and a little bit, have a little levity. So I talk about bagging groceries and things like that, how to think strategically, and also how to get your resume in front of the right person and in front of the employer to actually reflect and say, hey, I think I want to talk to this person, right? Because that's ultimately what we want to do. So let's kind of dig in a little bit and become a career archaeologist, if that's okay, right? Because there's a lot of things and pieces that we want to kind of unearth. So what is a resume, right? I asked that question kind of comically. We all know what it is, but what is the purpose of that resume, right? If we live in this world today where it takes an employer 10, 15, 20 seconds at the most to make a decision and take a look at a candidate and say, hey, I want to have a further dialogue with this professional. I feel like they could fit the bill of what I'm looking to in this role. How do I do that? How do I get their attention? Well, part of it is really understanding what your resume is intended to be. So first and foremost, we, as by nature, most of us, right? We don't like to brag about ourselves and how good we are and how awesome we are. But in this sense, a resume is supposed to be that. It is supposed to be that professional tool of, I'm awesome and you need to talk to me and I'm going to kind of win you over. Another part is to really show and validate. Look at my work, look at my body of work, look at my outcomes, look at my success points. And then really kind of to get a little bit, Kurt, it's your best damn piece of literature that you should have, right? Other than your eulogy, right? And somebody else writing that for you, you got to have a resume. That's your best document that you need to have written because that is your tool. All right, so what are some of the things that we want to kind of prepare? So before you even think about writing a resume, before you even think about what a resume needs to entail and what are the pieces of it, I want you to start thinking a little bit more about, hey, how do I just kind of identify who I am? What are my skills? So I'm going to show you. So this is kind of the approach that I take when I write a resume, and I've kind of brought it down to this granular level. But I want people to do, and as you start, if you've never written a resume before, or if you feel like, hey, it's time for a refresh, what I ask people to do is I want you to start at a very basic level and just write a biography about yourself, right? Be broad. You don't have, you could be specific, which I would be more preferable. But if you want to just be broad, not from the point of birth, but kind of notching those really high personal and professional achievements that you've had, whether it's you've been promoted or you received an award or you had children, you got your first job. Now write a biography about your life. I mean, some of the things that have impacted. Like for me, when I write my biography, I go back to my childhood because I think there's some reverence to um, I was I came to the US when I was 7 years old, right? My family came here with nothing, like so many people. And if not for the opportunities in education and networking and mentorship, I wouldn't be where I am today. So when I write my autobiography, I kind of start from that as my base ground. Everyone might have a different perspective, but write out in third person, probably a 2 to 3 paragraph short biography. And I ask people to use this method called gunning fog. I don't know if you've heard about it, but really what it is it's simple form. Everyone can write really using big words and kind of show how intelligent we are, but the key really is to just get to the point and to keep a resume and the content on it very simple. And so when you write your autobiography, do the same thing. Write to like a 5th or 6th grade level, that anyone at that level or higher can read and understand what you're writing about. So that's called the gunning fog. That's the first thing we want to do. The second, and the purpose of this is to kind of have that recall memory. And I kind of show here a few different type of recall memories. When I train people how to interview, we talk about these in a little bit more in depth. Serial recall, free recall, and cued recall, and in how you formulate your answer and how you put together an outcome, especially if you have those hypothetical questions in an interview. But in a resume, it's the same idea. When you're thinking about yourself, I want you to think about, oh, when I worked at this company, I did this, or this was kind of the process we followed, and this is how it worked for us, or this is how I went about solving a challenge that I had. So that's how I want you to start thinking about all these different ways as you start writing. Okay. So then the second thing I want you to do is I want you to create a list, and this is where we kind of just start bullet pointing or mapping out what have been your career highlights? What are things that your manager, your coworkers would say, hey, Michael stood out because he did this, right? He built an incredible matrices of scheduling that kind of created a ability for everyone to be on the same level playing field. Everybody knew where they needed to be. Or Michael received recognition because he was always there to volunteer early hours. Write about those things. Make bullet lists. And talk about your strengths. Brag about what are the things that you're really good at. Think about your weaknesses. Where have you struggled? Where have you suffered? Where are kind of areas that you want to improve? Because we're going to use that to our advantage later on. What risks did you take? What life events changed things for you? How have you been recognized? Awards? What groups were you part of? Organizations that you participate in? So, right, groups, you could be a member, but you could just be an attendant. Where did you travel? Are you well-rounded? What are your hobbies? So I want you to just create your own categories and make those lists, because you'll have a autobiography. You'll have these lists. These are going to be tools that we're going to use later on when we craft the resume, and I show you some examples. So I just you kind of reiterate again. Don't try to overthink it. Just keep it very simple. Just notch it down. Say, hey, I remember doing this. I remember participating in this event. I remember doing this. Don't try to say, oh, how does this relate to my job? Just make a very simplified list. Because I think when we start to overthink things, that's when we kind of start to falter, right? So keeping it simple is key. Okay. The third list that I want you to make, third part of this, is in chronological order, preferably, in order of time and history. Write down the jobs that you've had. Write down what were the trainings that you received in those jobs. What was the impact of those jobs, right? How does your experience in those roles compare to that of other professionals that were in the field and working alongside you? Put it down, put the dates in. Then the next list I want you to do is I want you to now think about more specific things, right? This is where we get a little bit down to the nitty gritty about, okay, here's all the different technology that I use. The names of software is important, but it's not as important as listing, your full-scale understanding of how to use, for example, Adobe Acrobat, or how have you used Canva for marketing design. Think about the impact of what you know in technology. What presentations have you led? What marketing initiatives have you used? What business development have you done? What's your budgeting experience, sales experience, leadership experience? Have you led any major initiatives? Have you sat on a job search committee? Have you been part of an organization? Start to make those lists and be very specific under each category. Now, these are my example categories. You can come up with your own. Technology seems to be one that everyone always picks, but if you're going into, for example, the sales industry, well, certainly you want to talk about sales. You want to talk about your marketing, your relationship management, your vendor relations, your product knowledge, your inventory experience. And then finally, your final list is going to consist of your education and your training, right? What is it that you attain, right? And we think about education, well, this college or this high school or that vocational training. Be specific, right? I always like to talk about education in the form of what the outcome of it was. As we gain experience, right, that becomes less relevant. Education is there to kind of check the box, but we want to make sure that it's noted. Okay. Those are the lists that I want you to make. So again, skills lists, experience lists, chronological order of your career, your trainings and education that you've had, in your biography as well. All right. So one of the questions that I get asked quite a bit is, I've been looking for different jobs, but I can't find anything in my field. And one of the conversations that I always have is, how much have you looked into your own skill set? And that's kind of an easy question, but it's also, I think, an insightful one, because if you didn't do all the different things that I just mentioned about, writing out your skills and trying to recall all of your experiences and outcomes, somebody can easily come and say, well, I'm in marketing and there's too many jobs in marketing. It's highly saturated. And so I tell people, create this kind of diagram, this Venn diagram, and let's look at marketing. Because if you do marketing, you probably understand the concept and have engaged in sales. If you've engaged in sales, you probably know a little bit of public relations. If you know public relations, you probably know about relationship management. If you know relationship management, you probably have worked with vendors. So I start to kind of create this Venn diagram that has a lot of overlap stemming from marketing. Or if you were in another field, the same concept. And so now your keyword searches for jobs can become public relations, can become sales and business development, can become, vendor relations or business partnership design or community engagement. You've broadened your content and you've broadened your keyword search to kind of engage. And so we look for those career overlaps. And this is really a nice, simple exercise if you're looking to do career transition. Okay, so this is just an example for you. The one thing that I really emphasize in, and I know we're here to talk about resume design, but you really can't talk about resume design until you understand some of these foundational pieces. And so I want to know what industries I'm looking at. And I do that by looking at common job titles, right? I read the job descriptions, trying to identify common themes within those job descriptions, trying to identify what HR is thinking, trying to get inside their head and say, hey, these three job descriptions, which are really similar, have all listed the top three requirements, and they all match across the board, or they keep showing up. So I try to understand what the salary range is, right? So I never short myself if an offer comes. What technology people are using. And I know that from looking at people's LinkedIn who worked at that company, are currently working. So I recently interviewed for a position, and I had to find out what kind of virtual platform they use, whether it's Zoom or they use Ring or any other type of signal communication platform. In their case, they use Adobe Connect. So I wanted to make sure that I could put that on my resume because I knew that I have background in that as well. Go see what's current with those companies that you're interested in. What are they talking about? And of course, look at their profiles so you have a good understanding of who they are. Because one of the first questions, I guarantee you, rather than asking, tell me a little bit about yourself, they're going to ask, why are you interested in this position? And it's nice to relate info about the company. Okay, so just doing a little bit of recon or research is going to be very helpful when crafting our resume. And again, I mentioned looking at different job descriptions, looking at those themes, what are the skills priority order, what keywords are they using, right? You're going to see a lot of HCP, if you're in pharmaceutical. What is that? Healthcare professional. Very simple, right? So understanding what is the lingo of the industry that you want to transition to or you're in would be very helpful. What is the structure of the organization? Are they very hierarchical structured? Is there a lot of managers, not that many employees, or vice versa? It's good to know what kind of the layers, if you can unearth those. Let's see. What are the minimum preferred qualifications, right? A lot of the times they'll say bachelor's degree required, master's preferred. Well, chances are most people with a master's degree are going to get first consideration unless their skills outweigh their credential. So you have to kind of know what we're looking for and what we're going into. And so we take these job descriptions and we build and we customize into our resume. All right. So I'm going to transition a little bit from those concept themes that I just talked to you about and the tactical approaches and kind of creating your content, and talk to you a little bit more about creating resumes, the way I do it, and what my perspective is, and what I've learned, and what I've learned from my peers and through my own research that I think has been very instrumental. And so in order to do that, we have to understand what the DNA of the resume is, right? What are the pieces? How do we map them together? What are taglines and industry highlights? And I'll show you all this in a minute. How do we write a summary of qualifications that actually matters and it's actually going to get read? What are the professional competencies? Skills. I don't like the word skills. Experience and outcomes. What kind of credentials do you have? And then, of course, closing content. And one of the things we always want to look at is for like hooks, right? Something that's going to get somebody to want to talk to you about, wow, that's really neat. So I recently worked with somebody who spoke 11 languages. And instead of just saying, able to speak 11 different languages, we wrote out all the different languages out there. This individual reached out to me and said, do you know how many employers wanted me to say hello in a foreign language? That's okay, but that's what got the hook. They had all the other qualifications, but that employer was really interested in how this person can help transition their customer base by engaging in all these different languages. So very interesting perspectives, always looking for a hook, kind of structuring our resume. All right, so I'm huge on customization, right? I really believe that you have to be very industry specific if you really want to excel, if you want to get noticed, because COVID has done one thing very clearly. It has identified that there is a greater need for more professionals who have these very streamlined qualifications as opposed to being fully generalists. And so if you have those skills, not job skills, those skills are going to translate really well into the employment market. You have to be able to also mirror the reader, who the audience is. So one of the things that I do is I try to create resumes. But before I do that, I go onto LinkedIn and I try to identify who the leadership is, who's HR of that particular company. Are they millennials? Are they Gen Y, Gen X? What is their perspective? Because, you know, the Gen Y, the baby boomer generation, for example, wants content. They want to see a long history of achievement. They will read, for the most part, I'm generalizing, of course, but they'll read all the content. They want to see a much heavier volume of language and outcome. Where the millennial, again, I'm generalizing, like myself, wants a very instant gratification. What have you done lately? What are your outcomes? So we kind of try to look at the profile of those professionals and kind of generalize a little bit of how and what their mind may be thinking to kind of create a resume that is appealing. I want to make it visually appealing. So the way it looks, the way it stands out and kind of pops out, which is really important. What is the layout for ease? So I look at creating white space and creating a very kind of resume, but really a document that tells a story and that is compelling and interesting between 1 and 2 pages. How do you keep somebody engaged, right? And you kind of joke and you could think of, how do I keep a 6-year-old engaged for more than 20 seconds? So if you can do that, you can do the same thing with a resume. So that's just a little bit about it. And I want to show you how to customize. So let's cut in. So one of the things that I really want to always do is I want to have a great call out. My name is my brand. That's who I am. I want to have a great look in my name. And so, you know, I served in elected office for 9 years. And, you know, obviously when you're campaigning, you want your name to be that top of mind, everybody, especially on election day, right? So the same concept transitions to resumes. Make your name large, make your name bold, good color scheme, have it stand out, have it be entrepreneurial. Don't have a very, I see a lot of resumes where the name is so tiny and everything else is so tiny. And I'm thinking, wow, like, did you just HTML write this in? You got to stand up for your brand. And one of the things, you know, that I tell people is think about a really nice company, a company that you want to work for. Look at their logo. Look at the brand that they're trying to exhibit. You need to treat your name the same way. And so, you know, having a nice heading like this, these are some examples. There are definitely many others, and I'll show you some of them in just a few minutes. But this is, you know, really when you create it, make sure that you have this kind of great chemistry between your name, your brand, and the theme of your resume. Okay. The next thing is I want you to have contact information. I get a question a lot: should I put my address on? And I tell people, what's the downside, right? When you don't put an address on, I think as an employer, they'll always wonder why, and you don't really want them to ask that question, right? So if you must, you know, just keep it simple. Like you don't have to say 123 Main Street because, frankly, we no longer get communicated through mail. Everything's through email. But giving a location gives an employer some perspective, and I think giving perspective is great. Um, Westfield, New Jersey, Greater New York metro area, PO Box occasionally is okay. Um, you know, if you're looking to move and you're open for relocation, right, open to relocation, right? And so I think that would be appreciated by the employer. So then I have to guess by somebody in New Jersey applying for a job in North Carolina. If you're applying to a federal job, you should have your address on there. You know, in many cases, New Jersey, if you're working for the state, has a New Jersey hiring requirement where you must have lived in the state within a year after hire. HR would love to see a physical address, right? They need to be able to run a background check. They don't want to have to go back and say, can you give me your address? But also, you know, companies that are headhunters and staffing agencies, they need a physical address sometimes to be able to even submit your application. Okay, so those are just some things to consider. And I don't really have questions on that. So the next thing I want to kind of emphasize is looking at your skill set, who you are as a professional in the industry that you've been, but also understanding the jobs and the career of the company and the title of the company that you want to go into. Identify a theme that's going to kind of speak to who you are and also what the company is looking for. And so instead of like saying, hey, I want to be, I'm an educator, that's great. So come up with a heading. that really works and kind of creates that theme. I call it a tagline identifier. The first one you see, the minority entrepreneur, inventor, and small business owner, was a client that I had that I was consulting for. She was a small business owner, and she was applying for a minority grant through the state of New Jersey. And so we wanted to emphasize that, you know, she is a startup business owner, a female, has a minority background, and that it's a great opportunity for her to be a great candidate for this grant. She did receive the grant because we created a resume that met and filled all the needs of what that application was looking for. But also, if you're in, let's say, sales, you know, if you're in sales, you could say instinctive sales leader slash, people mover, or if you're an IT, strategic global IT professional. That title alone says strategy means you know how to think on the fly. Global means you worked internationally. IT obviously speaks to the industry that you're looking to apply to. And professional obviously says that, hey, I have some experience. That title speaks volumes. So instead of having an employer who's looking at your resume search out and try to understand, well, what is your background? What is your specialty? Where's your niche? How can you fit this role? Before they even get through reading your entire resume, put it out there for them so they know right away who you are and what you stand for. Okay. So here's the next thing I want to do. So we have our heading, right? Strategic global IT professional, senior project analyst. The next thing I do is I put these tag words in. I like to put them in different places on a resume, but in this case, I put it right before the tagline. And what I do is, where do I get these? This is, remember that list you made from the very beginning of your skills? This is where that list comes into play. But I don't want you to put everything from that list into these tag words. What I want you to do is I want you to study and look at the job description and transition and blend those requirements and skills to your own and blend them together. And I think that will speak volumes in telling an employer, here's my title, here's my skills. So hopefully the employer looks and says, wow, Jane has all of these skills that she's got the title and the background of what I'm looking to hire. But look, she has a direct experience in client development and corporate training and compliance and data analytics. I need these things. I even put that on my job description because that's what I'm looking for. Duh, we customize, right? But it really helps kind of blend that in. All right, and as I just mentioned to you, where to get these words. You get them from the job descriptions, you get them from understanding and reading a little about the industry, you get them from your own experience and background. Okay. The next part is, I like to include this, and there's really two ways to do this. You know, we commonly know this as a summary of qualifications. It's a very short burst, 1 or 2 sentence summary of your skills and experiences related to the job. But what it really is, it's a way to showcase your top outcomes and achievements. So again, when you look at a job description, this time, instead of looking at keywords, what you're looking for is you're looking for themes. You know, if they're looking for somebody who's an incredible communicator, has the ability to build corporate relationships, or somebody who understands numbers and money and can be a controller, your summary qualifications is that kind of, let's put it all into this 1 or 2 sentences. Again, we're still at the very top of the page. It's your name, it's your address and contact information, it's your heading, it's your key skills related to the job, and your summary qualifications. What we call, as you know, above the fold. Above the fold of the newspaper is where all the relevant news is. We still have not even spoken about our work experience. We're still talking about, hey, here's my outcome. So this summary qualification is a very short burst summary of your experience and relevance to the job based on the themes in the job description. And what you want to include is your skills, your outcomes, your managerial experience, your recognitions. Numbers are great. Dollar signs always speak volumes, percentages. The other option, if you didn't want to do a summary qualification, is you can create a summary of highlights. So here are my top achievements that I've attained in my role in my most recent position. And again, we can bullet point them or keep them into very short burst sentences. I'll show you some examples of resumes. So here's a summary of qualifications. These are 3 different ones, right? digital thought leader shaping the future of multi-channel marketing and sales. I'm in the third bullet. Through advanced predictive marketing, social listening, market segmentation, and strategic CRM buyer personal analysis. So I'm trying to really hit into the theme of what the job is looking for, working off the job description. So every single time you will have to customize your resume a little bit. And that first half of your resume should be easy for you to transition from one job to the other, as long as you're not going from being an engineer to wanting to become a teacher, right? Those are pretty big leaps. So we want to keep to jobs that are relevant to our field. So again, the very first one, for example, I put the years of experience because the job description said at least 10 plus years of experience. They want to know that you've done multi-channel marketing, so I put that in there. They want to know you worked with big companies, so I put that in there, and I even named the companies. In this case, they were well-known, represented pharmaceuticals. Okay, so again, trying to get the reader to really say, wow, this is not canon. Here's another example of a summary qualifications. Special education professional, general education teacher, right? That's the tagline. But below that, the job description made it a reference twice that you need to be certified. You need to have that grades 1 through 6 certification. So what we wanted to make sure is we put that right out there so the employer doesn't have to go to your to your work experience and make sure that you're certified, or go to the second page in your education and see that you have that credential, right? And really, when creating a resume, I try to stick to 2 to 3 themes at the most and just hit away at those at different areas throughout your resume. Because if the reader doesn't catch it at the top, they'll catch it in the middle. If they don't catch it in the middle, they'll catch it at the bottom. Okay. And again, just trying to write very short burst summaries of experience. Here's one more. Impactful senior level professional with 18 plus years of collective experience driving national brands, managing strategic product campaigns, developing creative content, and consistently interrupting competitive industry standards. Known as a tactical leader and digital innovator, because COVID obviously caused everyone to transition to digital, right? Especially in marketing, with high-level entrepreneurial expertise, leveraging timely opportunities and establishing high-value business relationships to drive ROI. This is a current client that I have who's got this knowledge of marketing, but also knowledge of product, also understanding of the nutrition and science field, but really had to kind of rebrand her value as this entrepreneur and trying to grow a company from very beginning and startup to now being a multi-million-dollar enterprise. So we want to tell the story in the very first summary. So, and right away, I put those keywords there, industry knowledge. All right, so again, we're going to go back to those original lists that we made, and we're going to now start pulling, right? We're going to start talking about what our technology skills and experiences are. For example, so instead of, kind of share an example, so instead of just not notching or bullet pointing, here's all the skills that I have. One of the things you could add to your resume is you could break it down to categories, depending on what your experience is. So if you're in the field of research, you can have technology, you can have research and auditing, you can have publication and review. You can create different headings in your resume that will allow the reader to say, hey, this person has skills in the areas that I'm looking to hire, but look at all these other skills below that main heading. So I'll show you an example of that in a second, because I think it might be a little confusing. So here we go. So you see this leadership training, industry knowledge in CRM, and technical and budgeting. Those are 3 different categories that I pulled from a job description. I looked at the requirements on the job description within the content of the language, and I pulled those keywords and I dropped them into each of these 3 or 4 categories, right? Here's another way I did it, just kind of listing it, but I don't particularly like listing it. I like to be able to break it into themes, because it tells the reader, if they read nothing else, if they don't read any of this content, they're going to look at the heading. Okay, so I like breaking it up into themes. So just to go back, your name, your address, your tag, tagline, your tag keywords, your summary qualifications, And now you can put your skills, right? This is just one way to build a resume. Now let's talk a little bit about work experience and how we can write that. So one of the things that people like to do, because it's the easiest thing to do, it is to just write what you do in the job, right? And to say, I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this. That's great. The employer, when you're looking to get hired, already makes the assumption that you do those things in your job. What they want to know is what impacts you had, how you do it, and why you do it, because they need to understand how you can benefit and solve their problem. And so when you're writing your work experience, I want you to write about how do you solve the employer's problem by showing them what you've done to solve problems in your current job. So focus on outcomes, focus on achievements, focus on things that your contribution. Look at the job description and look at the way they say, hey, I want somebody who's a great communicator, first and foremost. 2, somebody who knows how to establish relationships. 3, somebody knows how to build a brand. 4, somebody knows how to create marketing content and be more compelling. Use that and build that into your job outcome, right? What you've done in your current role and how have you met those standards. And I'll show you some examples of how to do that in a second. Also put a little bit of a summary, right? Don't make assumptions that everybody knows. If you use abbreviated words or if you speak about an industry or where you're working, everybody knows what you're talking about. Don't make those assumptions. So you want to have a quick summary of work experience. So I have a friend that works for a company called Brentag. But you don't know what Brentag is based on the name, but they're one of the largest world distributors of chemical contents all over the country and all over the world. So we put together a little short summary and said Brentag International is based out of this region. They're out of Germany. They're focused on providing high quality care for customers in the areas of food, chemical, and nutrition distribution. So that gives the reader an understanding of what industry you're in. And then including numbers, percentages, data points always is a great thing because it shows that when you include numbers and you include percentages, what does that really do? It shows me, at least as a hiring manager, that the person whose resume I'm reading actually owned the process. They know the internal details of revenue and percentages and impact. So as opposed to kind of being a pilot driver, co-pilot, you're actually driving. And so as an employer, I look for that because I'll always have asked questions when I've done any kind of hiring for anything that are very specific because I wanted specific answers in response. And people who don't have specific answers, I knew that they weren't directly involved. So that helped me kind of sift out who I wanted to talk to next and who I did. All right, so again, one tactic in the body of your content is create those achievement outcomes, right? And write a short summary. So this is an example of what I just mentioned to you. Digital evolutions, data metrics, competitive intelligence, and budgeting. Those are key 4 words that I pulled from the job description because the employer specifically wanted somebody with that background. Well, I have that background, so I'm putting it as a heading below my job experience for my first position. And then I write exactly what I did in that job. So this is where I write in that opening paragraph. You could either write about the company, maybe a first sentence, and then I write about what is it that I do there. I just put it right out there. I take this thing out of it and I write to the employer what I do at the company. Because then the key points I'll show you is I talk about what is the outcomes of what I do. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so this is where I start talking about what are my outcomes? What do I do that leads to those outcomes? So one of the ways I like to do it, and again, I'm big about headings. I separate in every job that I work at, what are the key contributions that I've had based on specific headings? What are my leadership outcomes? What is my product development? What are my data metrics? What's my marketing experience, project management, training? Obviously looking at the job description, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to get the prospective employer to just at least look at the heading. They may not read everything. So at least if I can get them to look at the heading, then I think I've won them over because I'm showing them, hey, look, I have at least 7 areas of experience and outcomes in areas that you listed in your job description for this. All right, so what are some add-on things? So we've already got all these pieces in addition to our work experience. As I mentioned to you, we could do a professional highlights box. We could do kind of an award recognition box. Here's some things that I've been recognized for. I could talk about some lead project highlights. And this is a new one that I started doing recently, is transitional skills. Because I'm having a lot more clients come to me looking to switch industries. And so it's not easy to do, to make that pivot, because we need to focus on your skills because you don't have the experience. And so that we have to kind of sell that experience in a different way. So I create this bullet point kind of box to one of a few things that we do. And we just call it transitional skills. We keep it very simple. And we say, hey, I've never worked directly in human resources, for example, right? But although I've never worked directly in human resources, I've served on hiring panels. I have helped contribute to a policy manual. I served in the diversity council. So those pieces come together and you can say, hey, this can be great for HR. I've led some trainings about morale and motivation. So this is how we can kind of pivot. Okay, so some other add-ons: leadership and ROI outcomes. Numbers and data are great, right? It doesn't necessarily always have to relate to the job. It just has to show that you're an outgoing professional who's a go-getter, who's always willing to do something, right? So this is kind of the culmination of everything I talked about: the heading, the key tag words, the short summary bullet points, the call-out highlight box. Sometimes we could include a quote, sometimes we don't. Here's your key heading, skills and competencies. Here's your work experience and a call out box. This is just one example of a very simple form resume. This is a little bit more in depth. So again, it's just another example to share with you. Again, heading, certification, summary, break it down into themes, your professional competencies. Credentials, certificates, and training are relevant to this job, so we call it out pretty quickly, and then we go into the job description. Right? The style, design, and look of your resume is going to need to fit what the industry standards are. What is the expectation of the industry? I just did a resume, which I'll show you in a second, for a marketing professional who has a science background, but is very much in that tech marketing world. So they wanted a resume that was a little bit more infographic, a little more colorful, with their picture in it sometimes with a theme. That would not fly if you're applying for an accounting job. They want a pretty formatted, simple resume. So you have to know the industry. Again, just some experience, just another highlight design of how I write. You know, here's a short summary of what the job is, and here's my essential roles and responsibilities, and here's the outcomes that I've had in each one. And sorry, I know it's a little grainy. Here's another summary, the qualifications, just showing a variety of different looks. Obviously, I've blanked out the names of the people that I've worked with, but you know, we can create a sidebar that has your address, phone, email, and LinkedIn. So you don't have to take up the space at the top if we needed that extra volume, right? We wanted to get them more compelling information. So there's different resume layouts that we can use. Here's just another one. Again, highlights, heading, title, key tag words, always hitting away at the same 1, 2, maybe 3 themes, getting the employer to understand who you are and what you're going to contribute to that company. Here are the 2 most recent resumes that I've done for somebody. I do not use templates. I create everything from scratch. It's harder, it takes more time, but the reason I don't use templates is because templates limit your space and they limit the content that you could put in. So the one on the left is a marketing and sales resume. The one on the right is that infographic, more rich marketing type of resume. So you'll see there's some similarities and overlap, but the layout and look is completely different. And we also map this theme to the LinkedIn. So you now have created not just a resume, but your cover letter, your resume, and your LinkedIn are all part of one theme. Okay. So other pieces that we want to include, obviously we talked about education, volunteer experience. I know a lot of people take it for granted, but if you've done things that are philanthropic, things that have helped others, whether it's at your company or organization, whether it's personal, whether it's substitution work, and whatever it is, it's relevant. You never know the connection you can make and the impact that you can have. And so I like to put that on a resume. And of course, your certifications and trainings are really important because they tell the reader really, I've stayed relevant. I've kept myself abreast. There are so many free trainings you can get right now. Google, Amazon, there's so many free trainings that you can get right now. If you wanted to pay for something, you can go to Udemy or Coursera. There's a lot of ways you can learn Canvas skills and how to create labels and logos, Microsoft trainings for free. There's so many things that you can do that cost you nothing. So there's just something to consider, how to keep yourself upskilled, okay? And then how do we get through this? Obviously, we know that a lot of bigger companies are using algorithms. How do we get through these and application tracking systems? I'm going to show you some things that are really relevant. So I think you know this. Keywords is key. Written out content, meaning don't abbreviate on things that aren't really well known. Always include skills because they'll pick up keywords. Keep away from templates. Again, I don't particularly like them. I think there are some really great ones out there that look fantastic, but they could be limiting. Include your employer dates. That's really important. Spelling. Try to avoid fancy graphics, right? And keep links to a minimum. So if you're submitting your resume, in most cases, which you should, in PDF format, most of the time things will get picked up. And so what gets picked up is what employers really want. They want to see dollar signs. They want to see good content. They want to see analytics, percentages. They want to see data, and they want to see your leadership outcomes related to the job. So if you keep to these things, your resume will start to get picked up more. What I tell people that I consult, you should be applying to jobs that have been posted within the last 3 days at the max, because much more relevance for you to get a chance to be looked at. There are so many applications coming in for every job. I have a connection at Princeton who told me that within 2 hours of post, they get over 600 resumes for the position. So, you want to at least get a look at. So here's some other things to stand out. So as I mentioned to you, 3 to 5 days, send your content PDF, know your audience, which we talked about. Always include a cover letter, at least something that summarizes your experience and who you are in a way that speaks to the employer, but also talk about the company in the cover letter, what you discovered about them. Very few people do that. And I think that's a way you can get an edge in showing an employer that you did your research. Mirror your industry. So know the industry you're applying to, and always use keywords, right? Customization is key. I specialize in that. It's a continuous learning curve for me, but we've had a lot of success being able to help people customize and build a resume that teaches you the skills to kind of own it. So you never ever have to come back to us. We show you how to do it, right? We prefer referrals than kind of return business, because return business means we didn't achieve our goal. Referrals means that you had a great satisfaction. So this kind of summary, this is my contact information. I've done a number of these type of presentations. I love doing them because I love learning from other people, and I hope people can learn a little bit from what I can share. But I do a lot of my own research and understanding and learning and what's current and what's trending in career development, especially in workforce development. One of the things I'll mention, the last thing I'll mention, is we know ageism is a thing. So if you're reaching a certain age and you feel like you're being discriminated based on age, but you can't prove it, I can tell you it's true. I've seen it happening time and over again. The best way to kind of combat that is to just focus on your skills and your outcomes, because you bring a tremendous amount of value. And if somebody's passing you over, that means they're just not the right employer for you. And so you need to just be passionate. You need to be consistent and tenacious, and good opportunity will come. Networking is number one prior to cold applying. Cold applying is like a cold sales call as opposed to networking with a referral. So treat it that way. And with that, Debbie, I'm handing it back over to you.
Great. Can we see you again? And I will send
You really
everybody
want
your,
to? Yes, of course. Hold on one second.
we do. And
There you go.
I will send everybody your contact information. We had a question from Susan Sheehy Malanka and about tracking, getting through the tracking system. And Susan, I don't know whether you wanted to ask it or whether you would like me to ask it. I think you answered it some, but maybe she'd like more details. And I'm giving you that opportunity, Susan, who I might have just lost. Okay. I have a question about cover letters. Although your resume is can also be a cover letter, I'm wondering if you can give us some advice in general when that requires a cover letter specifically.
Yeah, I mean, my personal rule of thumb is I always include a cover letter because it's just another avenue for me to showcase myself, right? If I just submit a resume, that's great. But if I give you a cover letter, you might read it. And if it looks nice and it stands out and you highlight. So the way I craft a cover letter is really 5 things. One, I acknowledge the job I'm applying to. That's most obviously. Sometimes HR people or whoever looks through so many resumes, they don't know which job they're looking at. So I acknowledge the job I'm applying for. Second, I speak immediately about my skills and abilities and experiences. Third, I talk about the company. Fourth, I bullet point in the cover letter my themes and outcomes related to the job of what they're looking for in the job description. And then I give a very short close. So that's a very simple form cover letter. The other option is to do a little bit more of an infographic type where you're literally just showing your outcomes. For some people, I've done a cover letter, a resume, and then we've done a kind of a third edition page that summarizes here are the major projects I've worked on, because it's nice to kind of separate things, right? And I really felt that putting those pieces together can go a long way. And so I always include a cover letter. It's another chance for you to brand yourself.
Susan, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. I was just wondering, like, some of those, the way the resumes were formatted, would something like that get through an ATS system? Because it just seems like, now that's so prevalent.
So it depends. There's a lot of different type of ATS systems that pick up different content in different ways. Most of them are built in to pick up content in PDF. So once you convert it to PDF, it doesn't matter what the layout is, it's going to pick it up. In some cases, it won't. So any of those call out boxes, anything that's formatted in boxes may not get picked up. And I know that when I work with clients, I tell them that on purpose. As a matter of fact, lately I've started to build resumes all in toolboxes. And the reason I do that is I want to create a resume when I give it to the client that they can easily optimize and customize as they need to without ruining the whole format. And so from that perspective, from a networking perspective, from having a great resume that looks appealing, it may not be the best outcome for an ATS tracking. However, what I usually clients will ask me is give me a regular, fully beautiful looking resume that covers all the bells and whistles. Plus, can you give me a more simple format resume that I know that I can simply upload for ATS? And we do that. So knowing that it's a double-edged sword, you have to understand what you want. But I find the opportunity for somebody to be able to take their resume and modify it to be much greater value. Not all companies use ATS. Huge companies do. Smaller companies, 500 employees or less, don't necessarily. Not always, I should say, but I'm sure that some do. So you have to kind of play it out and understand, what you're looking for.
Michael, can you just explain what ATS is for those who don't know?
Yeah, it stands for Applicant Tracking System.
Justina, did you want to ask the question yourself or should I ask for you?
I see the question.
Okay.
If there's a gap, whether you got laid off, whether you left your work for your personal reasons, whatever the gap, there's really a couple of ways to cover that gap. So first and foremost, one of the ways to do it is to start your own company, start your own consulting brand. So you could show that you've been doing something. 2 is to go get some training and upskill yourself, because that's a great way to say, hey, I'm staying relevant. Another thing you can do, if you have a gap, I would put the dates anyway, but that's where the value of a cover letter and that summary qualifications comes in, because you can explain, I took 2 years to kind of upskill myself and do some side consulting and to rebrand my value or try to identify, do a career switch. And in the meantime, I've taken up other roles, or, some of us have had to step away for personal reasons, a sick family member. You want to make sure that you can emphasize that and explain it. It's not easy if there is a gap, but certainly if you can explain it, there's value. I've always found that if you are honest up front and you don't try to cover it up, the employers will react to it much more reasonably and much more understanding.
Susan, did you get the full answer to your question, I hope? While you're thinking about that, and you can chat with me or whatever, I just want to mention that a lot of what Michael mentioned was having to do with researching companies, researching industries. And I don't care if it's a professional job, a blue collar job, or a trade, research is really important. Your library, and if it happens to be Union Public Library, can really help you with that. And even if you don't have a Union Public Library card, when you come in, we can show you the resources that we have that can help you do those things. So I encourage you to look at your library for help. I also want to mention that if you live, work, or go to school in Union, you're more than welcome to get a library card from Union, and we hope you will. I'm going to give a quick advertisement for the Union email that lists the programs, our newsletter. Please just write yes in the chat or let me know, and I will add your name so you can hear about what programs we've got going on. Does someone else have a question they'd like to ask? I just was, the formatting to me seemed a little overwhelming to some people, for instance, me. And I know you said you do it originally, but I'm wondering if there's any sort of resources that you can use to help format your email. I can think of two, your resume. I can think of two. One is Canva and another is Publisher. But Michael, maybe you could speak to that. And then we have a LinkedIn question.
Yeah, I try to keep very simple. I build most of my resumes in Word because that's a platform that just anybody has access to, but also Google Docs. You can create it in Google Docs and convert. Canva is a great tool for graphics. I don't know if it's a wonderful tool for resume. I think it's more funky when it comes to creating verbiage and content. Resumes can look overwhelming, but because you're trying to share a lot of content about yourself to an employer, to kind of whet their appetite to say, hey, come look at me. You want to give them just enough, but not too much. So, I try to keep resumes well informed with enough detail, but I also, because I use those headings and because I categorize it and break it up into those different, I'm really just looking to get the employer to look at the headings. And if they want to read the content later, they can, but I'm trying to tell a story and I'm trying to reinforce themes. And what I found is that if you speak about the right content, volume doesn't matter as much. So I think Publisher is a great tool. I think you can use Canva. PowerPoint is another great tool. I think Word is probably the most simplistic, right? It's the most easily accessible tool with a lot of, if somebody wanted to go out and purchase a template, you can. And I know Microsoft offers a number of free templates. For somebody, it might be easy. One question that I didn't get asked, but I get asked all the time, so I'll bring it up. Should I include a photo on my resume? Because in the past that was taboo, and is it normal now? I think it really depends on the industry. As I mentioned, if you're going to accounting or finance, they don't really care what you look like. They want to know you can crunch numbers. But if you're in marketing and sales, I think it's appropriate these days to be able to include a photo, especially because they could easily jump on your LinkedIn and take a look.
So we have two questions about LinkedIn. Idel is first.
Is LinkedIn a useful tool to research companies or industries?
I mean, the companies that are active on LinkedIn, absolutely. You
Okay.
can read it and find out a lot about what the company is doing. I also like to read reviews about the company. So if you go to a website like PayScale, they'll tell you a little bit about the company from employee perspective, and that tells you about the culture. I really use LinkedIn to follow companies, so because I will then quickly see what jobs they're posting. LinkedIn is excellent for job search because you could do instant apply, but also I look at understanding who the HR people are. I'm huge on networking. I will cold message somebody and just say, "Hi, John, my name is so and so. Looking to transition into this field. I know you're very busy, and I appreciate your time. Would you find 2 minutes of your time to just have a chat with me about the industry?" You hit 50 people like that, 5 will reply, 2 will actually talk to you, 1 will probably go out of their way. So you got to be tenacious and consistent. I'm working with somebody right now who's transitioning from higher education to pharmaceutical science. A big leap, a big change. And so the first thing I said is you need to go find 5 people who are doing what you want to do. You need to understand the pathway of getting there. So it's just, LinkedIn is, I think, a wonderful tool if it's used correctly.
Okay.
It has limitations.
Yostina asked a similar question about how she makes a network, LinkedIn, that make people refer to her for a job. I'm not sure, and I think she had to mute because of children, which we can all relate to, or many of us can. Maybe you can talk about the connection of LinkedIn and resumes. What do you put on LinkedIn, which is a whole series. LinkedIn is a whole series of presentations. We have some on our YouTube channel, but Michael, maybe you can just mention something.
Yeah, I use LinkedIn quite extensively. I've tried it, using it in a lot of different ways. You can definitely create alerts. You can definitely upload your resume to it. I don't particularly recommend that because you're going to customize it every time. But you can also use LinkedIn direct apply, where you create a profile and you could just submit right as your LinkedIn profile. If you're applying to a lot of jobs, which I recommend to do 3 to 5 a day if you can. It takes me 15 minutes to customize a resume now, but using LinkedIn it's a great tool if you're using it right. And what it is, you have to know what it is. What it is it's a tool to connect and network with people. It is not a hiring tool, but it has hiring tool features. And so it's about building the relationships that are going to lead to referrals, that'll lead to a hire. But now you can search for jobs there, you can apply, you can direct submit your resume. So there's definitely a lot of good bones. It's the only and best platform out there. There are a few others out there that I know of. But LinkedIn obviously is kind of the big, conglomerate.
I think also groups, if you could talk about LinkedIn and using groups to network.
Join groups, because people post a lot of relevant content. You'll learn a lot about different industries. You will have access to writing things in groups that you can't write individually unless somebody accepts your friend request or your connection request. So, I worked very briefly in staffing and recruiting just to see what it was like. And so joining groups in healthcare, for example, to find a doctor and ask them a question who has background experience, achondroplasia or something like that. It was very difficult to do that by searching. But when I went into a group, I said, looking for a medical affairs doctor in achondroplasia. And you would get 3 or 4 replies say, "Oh, I've worked in rare disease and I've done that." So, same thing. I'm looking for a job in finance in the North Jersey area. Do you know anybody? You can connect to a group like North Jersey Career Experts or something like that. It's just the more you expose yourself to industry and professionals, the greater your chances of getting connected to another.
And once you're in a group, you can reach out to any one of the members in it, which is great.
Right.
So, I'm going to do a quick survey as if there's any more questions. In the meantime, I'm going to put in another advertisement for like us on Facebook. If you live, work, or go to school in Union, please come in and we'll get you a library card. Please sign up for our program newsletter so you can hear about all the resources. thank you all for coming in on such a gorgeous day and for this workshop. I can tell you that I've gone to a lot of workshops. This one was exceptional and it will be taped. So you'll be able to get the recording. I'm also going to press Michael for the name of all his resources that he mentioned so we can include them in the follow-up email. And Michael, Dr. Michael Yakubov, that was really exceptional. So thank you all for being here today. Hope to see you at Union Public Library or at additional programs. And Michael, you will see you're getting lots of good reactions.
No, I really appreciate it. If anyone ever has any questions, wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to talk to you. And I also do a presentation on interview skills. So if there's ever a need for that down the line, happy to do it. So
I think there might be.
Okay. So I do one on body language and I do another one on answering questions the right way.
So those who offer get taken. We love volunteers. Thank you all for coming, and I will send you Michael's contact information and everything else.
Debbie,
Okay?
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the week.
You too. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Michael, if you can stay on,
Yeah, okay. No problem.
and I
I was
will.
just about to hit leave meeting, so you caught me perfect.
And I'm just going to get people encouraged. Let's see. Okay. Idell, did you have another comment to make?
Yeah, just thank you for the workshop on today.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome. That's it.
And Christina, let's see. Hey, I'm gonna exit you, Idell. Is that okay?
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I hope you come again.
I will.
Great. Can I add your name to the newsletter list?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm not kidding. Okay.
You were good.